car as you move forward? Is that what I understand?
Don't be bashful.
That's okay. If you have loud voices, which I don't, so I'm going to use the microphone. Other people may not. But I want to thank you for being here on this cold evening. I see some repeat customers from the 3:30 session. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is tell you who I am, since I forgot the first time around to tell anybody who I was, and they kept saying, who is that strange woman? And anyway, I am a volunteer facilitator, and I am not connected to either the center or senior services. So I'm here as a neutral party to facilitate your questions and answers. So let me just tell you a little bit about the format. And what we're going to start with are some opening statements, one from Lyle Evans, the interim director for the Senior Center, one from, whoops, I'm turning the wrong way, one from Dave Robertson, the president of the board, and then one from Paula Houston, who is the CEO from Senior Services. And after they have completed their opening statements, they may have already answered some of your questions in those statements, but at that point, you may make statements or ask questions of them. And I'm going to loosely time it since it's a small group. I'm hoping that you'll keep your comments and your questions down to about 2 to 3 minutes. And I will let you know if you're going on too long, but otherwise this will be pretty informal. And like I say, if you'd like the microphone, we have a very short cord because we have a problem with the microphone. But you may come forward and use the microphone. If you don't want to do that, you can shout from where you are your questions. I'll repeat them if I think it's necessary for everyone to hear. Or we have two runners. We have Trish in the back and Hank over here. And they will bring you something to write a question or a comment on, and we will collect those. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is that if after the fact you have more questions that you want to submit, we'll show you a little later on 2 email addresses that you can email questions to. So if you don't get everything answered in this next hour, then you'll be able to follow up that way. So with that, unless you have questions about the format, I am going to turn it over, to Lyle.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again for being here on this Veterans Day. It's too loud. Okay. Let me turn it down. How's that? Is that better? All right. So thank you for being here on this Veterans Day. Who here is a veteran? Raise your hand, please. Really, Dan? Wow. Thank you so much for your service. And thank you for being here on Veterans Day. I'm here representing the staff of the Senior Center. That is my role on this panel, is to represent the staff along with the fabulous Holly McNeil. Could you stand up, Holly, please? If you all don't know who Holly is our social worker. She's a very well-respected colleague within the Seattle area. She's known for her outreach program. She goes to homebound seniors and does all kinds of work here in our community. And we get to work together every day, and I'm really happy to work with her. So we've put the mission statements of both Senior Services and our mission statement up, so you can read them and refer to them. We're all here for the same reason, to take care of you, our seniors. That's why we're here. So hope we can answer all those questions. And now I want to introduce Mr. David Robertson, who I just found out is a veteran. Oh. Hi, David.
I want to thank you all for coming. There are other board members here. I would like them to stand up. I'm not going to go through their names because I kind of forget names. But if they could just all kind of stand up so that you know there are other board members. On behalf of the board directors, I want to welcome you to the town hall meeting. It's long been needed, and I'm glad that you're all here. We did have a first good session. I anticipate we're going to have a good second session. I would like to state that West Seattle Senior Center Board of Directors has made a decision to remain at this time under the current umbrella with Senior Services and to continue to work in partnership with Senior Services to fulfill the mission statements for both Senior Services and West Seattle Center. As you know, Lyle pointed out, we have the mission statements up here. The Senior Center Board of Directors fully supports Lyle's position as the interim executive director. The Board of Directors will continue to work closely with Lyle in guiding business decisions of the organization, assist in fundraising efforts, and help to develop services and programs that meet the changing needs of seniors in our community. Nancy, did you want to speak? I'm going to refer the mic to Nancy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Nancy Sorensen. I'm a member of the board, and I'm one that I claim seniority over everybody in this room in terms of my length of time that I've been affiliated with the Senior Center and with Senior Services. I've been either on the board or volunteering here at the Senior Center for over 35 years. I've been served as the president of the board of the Senior Center of West Seattle. I've also been on the board of Senior Services and served on the board as president of the board of Senior Services. And so I've got somewhat of a unique perspective and background that I bring to this evening's meeting. And we really appreciate the community coming out, because when the board here of the Senior Center decided to stay at this time as a affiliated member with Senior Services, the concern was that there was a need for more information. And part of the issue of more information is what's the opinion, what's the support of the community in terms of being independent or of being a part of Senior Services. And as you will hear, there's going to be some discussion about a memorandum of agreement, which is a contract that the Senior Center of West Seattle has signed every 12 months with Senior Services, every 12 months for 30 years, more than 30 years. And I know that because I'm the one that wrote the initial memorandum of agreement. It's gone through a number of changes, but I wrote the initial one way back when. And every 12 months, the Senior Center of West Seattle has signed this memorandum of agreement, which makes the Senior Center here and Senior Services contractual partners in operations, so that the Senior Services has provided services with payment of staff, and staff benefits, of other services that are provided. The Senior Center receives those services. Note should be made that the Senior Center pays for those services, and the cost we pay for the services plus administrative expenses of a little over 17% that goes to Senior Services. So you will hear that one of the questions is whether this memorandum of agreement, which has been in effect for 30 plus years, should continue in effect, and whether the Senior Center, instead of being an independent body, should become a part of a program, in essence, of Senior Services, and that the board here would become an advisory board. And tied in with that is the question of, well, what would happen with the ownership of the building? This building is owned by the Senior Center of West Seattle, free and clear. The Senior Center purchased it in 1986 with community support. With community support, we raised over $3 million and did the substantial remodel about 10 years ago or so, and really more than doubled the size of the Senior Center. So the question is, who's going to be owning the Senior Center building and the reserves that the center has built up? And the question is, does it remain a part of the Senior Center, or is it held with some sort of, as you'll hear discussion about, some sort of community trust with a long-term lease to Senior Services, for Senior Services to own it or to operate it as a leaseholder, as a tenant, and all. So those are the questions that we have. We invite your questions in terms of the funding of the center, of the expenses of the center, the projections into the future that is it doable for the senior center to remain an independent entity, and if it is independent, can it financially support itself? And we have the information, and we can share some detail of that with everyone. So please come forward with your questions. So, pass them on.
Thank you, Nancy. I would like to refer this over now to Senior Services. Paula?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Dave. As I was introduced, I'm Paula Houston. I'm the CEO for Senior Services. I want to introduce my other colleagues here. This is Joanne Donahue. She is our Vice President of Community Development, and she oversees all the senior centers and is Lyle's boss. Next to her is Tim Bridges. He is our Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. So they will both be answering questions as well. So one of the first things I want to let everyone know here is that at Senior Services, we believe that the senior centers, and we run 7 senior centers, 6 of them are run under the Memorandum of Agreement, which was referenced, and West Seattle is one of them. But we believe all of our senior centers are very, very critical parts of the network of services and programs that we have to serve seniors and those in the community. We want all of the senior centers to stay with us. We want to have a presence in all of the communities that we possibly can so that we can serve as many seniors as we possibly can. With that being said, the Memorandum of Agreement that we currently operate under has become problematic. It's almost 50 years old. I've been questioned by our funders since I've been here a little over a year. It has been brought up on our audit. We've had an audit finding about it. And as Tim mentioned in the first session that we had, several years ago, the IRS questioned us about it, the way we put our returns together. So the time has come that we need to take a look at it. Our board has now given us direction to take a look at a different relationship with our senior centers than the one that is under the current Memorandum of Agreement. So with that, we have put together a task force of our board and the 3 of us here, and we're going to start looking at some different options for a different relationship. No decisions have been made. The task force has met one time. We will meet again for the second time next week, this week, Thursday. In the process, while we're doing that, we're going to gather information from all of our senior centers, staff, board, members, volunteers, and any other stakeholders that you all identify that you want to have involved in that process. We want to make sure that whatever agreement we come to is optimal for each center and is optimal for us. And the main thing is optimal for the seniors that we're serving. We know that there are some issues that people are concerned about, staff, board, community, and there are 3 main ones. We know there are some individual centers that have different ones, but the 3 main ones Nancy referenced. One is 3 of our centers own the buildings. This is one of those centers. We want to make sure that you retain that asset, the building. We do not want to own your building. I will say that again. We do not want to own the building. The second one is the reserves, which were referenced. That's cash in the bank that you have. We do not want your money. We want you to retain those financial assets. The third one that has come up as a concern is that there will be no community involvement. We want to make sure that there is community involvement. We know this is a community-based center. The community is the reason this center is here. So whatever that body of community people looks like, it will be somebody that has influence over the programming that is here. It may not be a governing board with fiduciary responsibility, but we will make sure that there is some sort of community involvement. So with that, we can turn it back over to Charlotte and get some questions.
A couple of things that I wanted to point out before we start taking statements or questions. The first is that we have a threefold purpose tonight, and it's not to make a decision about whether you stay or go. It's about the details, the clarifying the facts. It's about finding out where you are now, and it's also about finding out the direction that you as community members want the board and the center and the senior services to go in. So that's why they're here, to take input from you. Now, the one topic that is not open for discussion has to do with the former director of the senior center. And the reason that isn't open for discussion is there are both privacy and legal issues involved, and not appropriate for a public forum such as this is. But other than that, we have a variety of topics. Let's see, I got Vanna Whites on both sides. Yes, Vanna Green over here. Yeah, these are the discussion topics that appeared on the blog, as well as other feedback that has been given to both the center and senior services. And it's not there to limit in the questions that you ask in any way, shape, or form. It's just that if you were curious about what topics, everybody in the community seems to be focused on, these are those topics. So again, let me remind you that you may shout from where you are. You may come up here and use the microphone if you'd like, or you can write out a question and I will read it for you. So whichever you would like. Anyone have a question to start us off tonight? Okay?
I have a pretty loud voice. So if the building is not in question, and if our finances aren't in question, then what are the problems? What are the issues that are a problem? You're talking about IRS forms and stuff. What is the problem? What's the contention? Is there a contention?
I'm going to start. I'll start, and then there might be some things that Paul and Tim would like to add. As the person that is most intimately involved with the senior centers, I know I have kind of firsthand knowledge of what it's like to try to manage the relationship, and it's a challenging one. It's very complex. There's not clear lines of authority or accountability. And so the way that plays out, because those are sometimes words that sound a little bit vague, the way that plays out is sometimes when we go to hire a director for a senior center, the board has one idea about who should be hired. Senior services has sort of another idea about who should be hired. And then we can have a lot of issues that we're kind of managing and having to work on. Usually, in most organizations, you have a single entity that makes that decision, makes it a lot clearer. Also, a single entity that makes that decision when the relationship isn't working out. When you've got a couple of organizations involved with that decision, it gets messy and unclear. So that's just sort of one example. Another example most recently is a senior center that decided to go independent. And they gave it a try for about a year and couldn't make it. And so their board did not seem to, they had not done a lot of research about what was involved with going independent. And so when they found themselves as an independent senior center and they thought it would be easier to raise money, it was actually more difficult to raise money because they were a small, community-based organization. They had no line of credit they could tap, and they found themselves in about a year without the money to even pay their staff. So these are some examples of some of the complexities that are involved with trying to run an organization that has 7 governing boards, basically, all sometimes making decisions that don't quite line up. So that's a little bit why we're looking at making a change.
try not to strangle Dave here. I think there's several issues, there's several thoughts that we need to have to consider. And one is the level of trust. That while we're not going to be discussing personnel matters, there is clearly the concern that the memorandum of agreement that we presently have was violated when the previous director, the previous Karen Sisson, was terminated without involvement or consultation of the local board here. That's one issue, is kind of the level of trust. The second issue is that while the Senior Services does not want to own the building, and ownership of a building really has liability and responsibilities that go with it, Senior Services has said that, well, they do want to have a long-term lease on the building at a token amount, so that they would have a 50 or 100-year lease of the building. It would be owned by some sort of a trust. Then the question is, well, where would the trust have the money to pay for maintenance, a new roof, a new heating system, those sorts of expenses that go with the building, and that hasn't been resolved. The issue is that the board of directors of the Senior Center of West Seattle, which is a governing board, would become an advisory board, and the center operations would become simply a program of senior services run by senior services, and the board would simply be an advisory position. Joanne mentioned, well, what about the budget into the future? The senior center here has spent a fair amount of time and analysis in projecting the budget forward for the next 3 years of revenue and expenses, and there would be clearly some changes. I mean, there would be changes in terms of bookkeeping services that are provided by senior services that we pay for. We would now be paying for those services to be provided by a different entity, either staff or bookkeeping service. The insurance, health insurance that for staff that is provided and paid for by us through senior services as a group policy, we would be needing to provide additional coverage independently. And there's some additional cost in that and valuation of those. So there's expenses that the senior center here would have to undertake and pay on its own. And that's a part of this budget looking forward into 3 years to say, is it doable for the Senior Center of West Seattle to assume those expenses, those sorts of responsibilities? And some detailed budget analysis that I share with anyone, and the answer is yes, it's doable looking ahead in 3 years. Then the question is, well, what about programs and services that are provided here? Or where, the community nutrition program here, the social worker, any of the other programs that are provided, the Meals on Wheels that is based here. Would there be a change in those services? And the answer is no. And the reason for that is that those programs are underwritten by government dollars that are earmarked of where the point of service is, and this is the point of service. So regardless of whether Senior Center of West Seattle remains affiliated with senior services or not, the services that are provided would remain the same. So the real question is one of budgeting, and the question is one of, is there community support for the center? Community supported the center when they bought the building in 1986, paid for the building. There was community support when we had fundraising and raised over $3 million in West Seattle, among West Seattle without additional dollars from senior services. We raised the money, we did the major remodel. Is there community support that would continue for a senior center if it were an independent entity? So Those are the questions, and this is why we're wanting to hear, the board wants to hear from the community of what's the community's thoughts and what are the community's concerns and questions, because we really view ourselves as accountable to you, the community, that supported this and you know, has supported it. You know, we have now, this center has grown enormously. We've got over 250 volunteers that are volunteering. We've got community dollars that are here. Is the community going to continue to support a senior center, and how?
First of all, I'd like to say that I really support the current staff as they are today. There have been a number of changes, and I'm very supportive. I almost didn't come today because I didn't feel that I would have any impact. It concerns me that this whole big shall we go, shall we stay is happening, but it appears to me it's the board that decides that, and I never elected the board. In fact, the board hasn't been, there's been no votes for board members during the entire time, 6 years I've worked here, and some of the people who I know who are members, have been members longer, said they used to be elected, but not anymore. And I also know a friend of mine who was on the board and was asked to step down so that the person who worked here before could choose somebody to take her place. And so how is it that I'm being represented if I don't get to vote? And what is this whole community get-together about? That's all.
I need to answer part of that question. As far as the board members, every year we go through October and November, we go through a vote of bringing in new board members. The boards, when the members are elected to the board, they can serve 3 consecutive 3-year terms. Who elects them? Mm-hmm. The board does an interview of any nominations that come through. We send out board packets to anybody that's interested in becoming a member on the board. We send out a packet, they fill it out, it comes back, we review it, we do a nominations committee will review it, it's taken to the board itself, and then those individuals that the nomination committee feels are good applicants will present it to the board, and then we take a vote. So every year there are new members put into the board.
Who are the voters?
The board.
So the board picks its own members, as opposed to having it open. I mean, I've been involved in board-like groups connected with my old college and like that, and it's always open to the whole membership. It may be the board picks a slate of people that are running, but at some point the membership gets a ballot. And so, to me, and I like a lot of you, I've worked with you, but I don't understand. It seems like a close-knit, self-perpetuating group.
It's not a self-perpetuating group. We open it up so that the community, whether it be the newsletter or however it gets out to people, that they can opt to maybe want to join the board, but they do have to fill out a packet.
But
this is the way it has been for years and years and years.
My problem is not, I mean, what about people like myself who don't want to be on the board, but would like to vote for board members?
We used to vote.
Yeah, we used to
vote. There used to be a vote out for all the new members of the board, and we had a right to vote how we would like to have the board. So, but that has not been going on lately.
No, the bylaws were changed several years ago, so that now the board nominating committee really presents the.
And they vote for themselves.
They make the recommendation, yes, and so yes, it is kind of a self-perpetuating. It's not frankly, it's not unusual for nonprofit organizations to be set up in this fashion, but that's the way it is set up, and no, the members do not vote. So
I'm a board member, and I know most of these people, just so you know. I just worked with seniors in West Seattle. I lived in West Seattle. I cared about the West Seattle community. And so one day Karen gave me a call and said, hey, you did a great job taking care of my mom at one point in time. Do you have some extra time? Do you want to sit down and talk about this? I didn't know. I knew Peter and Kathy, and that was it. So it wasn't some big inside club, is what I'm trying to say. I'm on the board
Yeah,
now.
she's on the board.
Yeah, I'm on the board now, and that's how I came to be.
If the board decides on the applicant's list.
You know, we're losing the ability to hear people without the microphone.
Can you not hear her?
Ma'am,
Use the
ma'am,
microphone.
use the microphone, they can't hear you on the other side of the room.
Well, okay.
She's going to be heard.
And we'd encourage those people to go up and use the microphone, please.
My question is, if the board was elected in the beginning, and then they changed the bylaws so that now they are in the decision-making position, and they select who will be on the board, I don't think that's the democratic way that we had it set up in the beginning. And I wonder what happened when this bylaw, if that's what happened. Because, as I see it, most of the people are not for this. Thank you.
I'm sorry, they're not for what?
They're not for
My name is Suzanne Duffy Kane, and I'm a volunteer here. I sit on the board of directors of Kepler College of Astrological Arts and Sciences, and we select our board members the same way. It's not, and I believe colleges and universities do too. Just for point of information.
Which way though?
Type of organization.
Which way? With a vote or by yourself?
And I'm on the board, and I did not know the other board members when I was nominated. And I also was on the board for Lake Washington Technical School Foundation, and it was the similar way that it was done, so it isn't unusual.
We have a follow-up question.
I was just wondering, you said at the end that most of the members don't support it. Don't support what? I just wanted clarification as to what you thought.
I get the
We
feeling
don't
that
support.
there is a diverse opinion as to which way this should go. And my question was just, where did the board come from? And somebody answered that by saying that the board selects the members, which left me still wondering, where did the board come from? And then I heard her say that they voted, or said they voted at one time for the board that is now the selecting group for their new people, which means the people no longer are voting.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I'd like to propose a little bit of a compromise here. How about we the people out here, the membership, get to elect a board member from our own group to sit on the board without the financial obligations and all the rest of it that you board members have to go through. And therefore we have somebody that we can go to and they can come to us and provide at least a little bit of access. Now, I personally, I'm around here a lot, and outside of two of the board of directors, neither of which is here tonight, I've never seen any of you. And I've been here for years.
I see you in the front desk. That used to be the way it was done. We had a member from the
Okay.
senior center itself, the West Seattle Senior Center, as a member to be voted on the board.
Yeah, and not an ex-board member. They can't run for this position. Okay, somebody, just, okay, then we have access to the board if we want it.
So what you're asking is if we would consider changing our bylaws to where you're asking so that we would possibly change our bylaws to include that we have one board member come from the membership of the center, voted on by the center. Is that what you're asking?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's what I am suggesting.
Okay. I appreciate the suggestion. All I can do at this point is, I've written it down here, is take it into the board and present it to the board so that we can have that discussion. That's all I can say at this point. I'm sorry.
I understand. We're just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Can we also say that board meetings are always open?
Right.
Anybody, you don't have to be a member of the senior center, anybody can come to a board meeting. It's the second Wednesday of the month at 5:30. Tomorrow night is our next board meeting. But I love what you said. I think that there should be representation as well. I like that a lot. But you can also come and just be and hear what's going on and have an input. We would encourage that.
But do they have an impact?
I think so, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, I see hands.
I'm not really like trying to say change the board. I'm just saying if they are being used this way, how can they then decide to separate the senior center? It seems like I don't know how it's owned or how it's handled, but it just seems like this group of people that is self-selected shouldn't be in charge of taking everything away, and we're just standing there wondering what happened. And I wonder also how other senior centers do their boards. And I don't know if anybody here knows that.
Who wants to handle that one? That's multiple questions.
I'll answer the second part of that. All of our senior centers have boards that are elected the same way that this one is. None of them have a membership representative that is voted on by the membership.
And likewise, senior services has the same board, same arrangements in terms of its selection.
The difference there is that senior services doesn't have a membership.
Correct.
That's a very big difference.
So
there's no membership that would even be available to select a member of our board of directors.
So I think there's really, one question is in terms of the organization of the board of directors of the Senior Center of West Seattle. And that's one question, and that's a question that needs to be addressed. And really the focus tonight is on the question of what's the arrangement, affiliation between the Senior Center and Senior Services, because they're both, if you don't like the self-perpetuating boards, they both have self-perpetuating boards. That's a separate issue. But the issue is, the real question is, what about the center? Does the center want to remain as a self-governing entity that can contract with senior services or contract with whomever for services? Or does the senior center want to become a program and an integral part of senior services and really run by senior services? And the board, the local board here, would be simply in an advisory capacity. So that's the real question tonight that we're faced with. Now, there may be issues, I appreciate your issues and concerns on the board, but that's an issue that we're not really addressing tonight. We are addressing the issue of the relationship between the senior center and senior services.
So I just want to make a clarification. Nancy has referenced one option that has been put forward in terms of a change of relationship. Our task force is just at the beginning stages of looking at options. Nothing has been decided, so she's referenced becoming a program and a land trust, and those are definitely things that have been discussed, but it has not been decided. And any decision that is made on the future of this center will be up to this board. We will lay out some options, and as I said, we want all the senior centers to stay with us, but ultimately the decision, whether you stay with us, whether you go independent, or whether you join another organization, is yours. And the fundamental question you have to ask yourselves is, are you going to be better off with us, or independent, or with another organization? And we believe you would be better off with us. We know we would be better off with you, but ultimately that decision is going to be the decision of this board. Like it or not, that's the structure that you have. That is the decision-making body. They are a governing board, they are a fiduciary board. They are the ones that will have the ultimate decision.
And what's your preliminary timeline to make those decisions?
We're looking at least a year. As I said, our board has just formed the task force. We've just started looking at models. We're going through a very thoughtful process. We're not going to get out ahead of our board on this, we being the staff. And we're going to involve community, boards, staff, volunteers, participants, and any other stakeholders, thank you, that you believe are necessary to be involved in your decision.
And does this apply to all of your senior centers or just the West Seattle?
No, that applies to all of our senior centers. We have 7 senior centers. 6 of them are operated under this memorandum of agreement. We have one that is already a program or a branch, if you will, of senior services.
And who comprises the task force?
It is board members and the 3 of us.
The memorandum of agreement, every 12 months, there's been a new memorandum of agreement signed between the Senior Center, West Seattle, and Senior Services. And the memorandum of agreement, it runs until August 8th of 2015. Paula gave notice said that they'd received information from their auditor that, well, this agreement that had been in effect one form or another, basically for over 30 years, is no longer satisfactory. So we're on a different type of a timeline, and we're under some issue in terms of what the Senior Center has done now in terms of its study and analysis and budgeting going 3 years into the future. So we know that there's major changes that are going to be coming. We know that Senior Services did violate the memorandum of agreement in the termination. So we have some factual basis for wanting and needing to make a decision so that the center doesn't just kind of bump along on this sort of a unsecure situation. Now, are we in or are we out? The center board wanted to do and wants to do further research, and hearing from the community is a part of that research.
I'm a volunteer previously, and now I'm an interim events program coordinator for here at Whitey. I was at the first meeting, and I saw how it got out a little bit out of hand. I have no personal opinion on whether we stay or whether we go. I'm here for the seniors, okay? At the beginning of this meeting, there was a topic that was said was going to be no holds barred, can't discuss it in any way, shape, or form. Nancy, I'm sorry, you have touched 3 times on that subject. Why are we keep going back to the whole thing with Karen? Why is it that you brought it up not once, but 3 separate times by saying when they violated this agreement? Violating the agreement was a moot point. The topic of discussion is why should we stay or why should we go? Why are you bringing up that whole situation?
I'd like to address that for a moment if I can. I think it goes directly to something I'd like to talk about too, is it goes to trust. Okay, the issue is trust. Do we trust in senior services? Yes, they did violate the agreement. We don't have to say why, but they did violate, okay? The second thing is, Joanne pointed out that there was a center that left the agency for a year and came back because they couldn't make it. That center was notoriously always incapable of providing enough funds for their own center, and I believe they were almost $300,000 in debt to senior services when they left. And it's no surprise that they didn't make it on their own. But again, senior services only gave us part of the story. Again, that's going to trust. Oh, they didn't make it. You won't make it either, is the assumption. It's again trust, you know. So I think that they violated the agreement. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't say why, but they did violate the agreement. They've only given us part of the information there. It's part of what we need to decide whether we're going to stay or whether we go. And I agree, we can't continue to bump along for a year while they make up their mind. The center is not operating up to stuff. We're understaffed. Our staff is not trained. And we're expected to survive for 12 to 18 months until they get a conceptual of what they want to do. they've already said that the board needs to be dissolved because that's in violation from their auditor. That means if the board goes away, the membership doesn't have the clout that they do now, even though they need to be more input to the board. I think that's a good, valid thing. And I think you should start attending board meetings. You know, again, that's the one thing that they said. The auditors say you can't have these 6 individual entities that have power. So that becomes what happens to the building, because the building is currently owned by the Senior Center Board of West Seattle for the benefit of the Senior Center. If that board is dissolved, it has to go to a third entity, and that we don't know what that control would be. But it wouldn't be this group per se. So,
If I could piggyback on that for me, the memorandum of agreement, in my mind, is a document that was signed by Paula. It's a document that was signed by Karen. It's the document that the board goes to and says, this is how we play in the sandbox with senior services. And in my mind, as a board member, this is how senior services plays fairly in the sandbox with us. So the fact that the memorandum of agreement was broken once, my question is it going to be upheld now? Can we trust you that through August 2015, if we stay with you that long, can we play by the same sandbox rules? As a board member, as a community member, can I know where I stand when I'm voting on things as a board member, that if we follow the memorandum of agreement, are you all going to as well moving forward?
So I will answer, there were multiple questions. First of all, I want to know if you would still like for Nancy to answer your first question,
Yes,
because
I would.
that got kind
I
of
would.
disappeared.
Yes, I would.
Well, the issue, the reason I brought it up was simply a matter of integrity and trust, as has been alluded to by Doug and Nicole, is that if you fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And if an organization breaches an agreement in a very serious manner, and that is termination of a director, in violation of the terms of the memorandum of agreement, how can we trust anything else that they say? So it's not to discuss other issues or why or whatever, but the memorandum of agreement, and we can certainly provide copies of it to anyone, but it does mandate and say that any termination of a director must be done to consideration of the wishes and consultation with the board of directors of the senior center. That did not occur, excuse me, and that is the reason that early on the center board did adopt a resolution voting no confidence in Paula and in senior services because of their breach of the agreement. So.
And while I cannot and will not, for the reasons stated earlier, comment on a personnel issue, I can assure you that Senior Services has adhered to all of the tenets under the memorandum of agreement.
Okay, this is obviously an issue that we will not resolve because it's hard to talk about whether something was done or when it wasn't done if you can't talk about the details. So I'm really sorry to interrupt on that. If you
It's time to put the 800-pound gorilla aside for tonight. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's get back to it. I'd like to drill into the financial aspects of going independent against social services tonight. Okay? And here's the question. I want to direct this at Holly. As I understand it, Lyle and the rest of his crew are all actually employees of senior services. But where do you get paid? Are you an employee of senior services?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what I'd like to know is you know where all your money comes because you got lots of programs out in the community and you got them in here and you're all over everywhere. Okay. If we go independent, okay, do you feel like you're going to still receive the same financial support that you're receiving now to run all of your programs as opposed to or compared to running in senior services? I mean, just what you're responsible for.
You know, I'm not really sure. So part of my money comes from a grant that we get from the city, and I think that a part of that comes from the respect and the longevity of senior services. I think they're well thought of in the community. They've been providing services to seniors for 30 plus years, and I do worry a piece of my salary. I don't know that our grant writing capabilities would be as successful. I don't know. They could be very successful. You know, I'm not certain how to answer that. I don't know how that would work out.
All right. Now, Lyle, I'm just going to take the floor for another minute or two. Lyle, this center has a certain set of expenses. You know, there's payroll to meet if you go independent, and there's maintenance, and there's some program expenses, and there's some insurance and kind of basic things. Ms. Sorensen over here has said that we own the building outright. Does that mean that the loan on the addition has all been paid off?
We own the building outright.
So that, okay. Are there any other either things that you see, giant expenses or out of ordinary expenses that we're going to incur in the next 5 years? Or are there any other hidden things that we're paying now that we don't really know about that are big expenses, because we're going to have to take on a whole payroll expense and all that kind of stuff? You understand my question?
I do.
Okay.
And the senior center is running a business. This is a business, and that's what I'm doing, is running a business here, as well as taking care of all of you every day, which is so much fun. But it's a business, and there are expenses, personnel expenses, human resource expenses, IT, all of those things which are currently paid through senior services. If we choose to go independent, we would have to, as Nancy said, we would have to get those independently. That responsibility falls on the executive director, whether it's me or someone else or whoever the executive director is. They're going to have to, in addition to everything that currently happens, fundraising, events, everything that the executive director currently does, then that person is going to have to do all of these other things. So it makes the job a lot more intense, a lot harder. You'd probably have to add another position. So, does that answer your question?
Okay. Now, and that's the 17.7%.
70% is what we currently pay senior services for that, yes.
Okay, now the next thing is, because somebody over here mentioned that already, do you have access to a grant writer that can go after all the federal monies and all the rest of it?
We do. She's sitting right there. Her name is Joanne Donahue.
Okay, but wait, you're getting ahead of my question.
If we went separate, yes, we do.
If you go separate,
yes.
Okay, and you've got to go after this money that you're staying away from because you're honoring their, yeah, okay. And can you go successfully after that? You've got somebody that can successfully go after all that money because we're talking about replacing it.
Let me see if I understand the question correctly. You're asking, could we hire another grant writer?
No, on our own.
Yes.
Because we're relying on senior services right now to do all that, to get out to wherever all these funds are and get them together, and then they funnel through us.
Yes.
Now you're talking about standing independent.
Yes.
Can you go after those?
We can. We can hire a grant writer. We can go after different grants. The voice is not as loud, is my understanding. We wouldn't get as many grants, and Joanne could probably speak to that better than I can, but we wouldn't get, our voice would not be as loud because we'd be a smaller nonprofit. Yes.
Not on the grant issue, but I know who writes the grants for this building is Karen. But I do want to stick to this, should we leave or should we go? And if our board, which maybe is no longer, I don't know, cannot make up their mind that they can trust senior services downtown, but they can't really trust them because they know they've already broken that trust. But if they need to have help, I think the community would be more than happy because the community built the building, the community pays and raises, and when any funds are needed to raise for elevator or for the complete remodel of the building, who paid that? It didn't come from downtown. It came from this community. This community should have the right to put this on a ballot for West Seattle people and vote that we be independent.
Thank you.
I should mention too that your comments are being recorded, well, not recorded exactly, they're being summarized so that we do have a record of what was asked and what was stated, just so you know that. Now, somebody...
Lyle?
Yes.
Part of your position is to raise funds. You're not just supposed to be in the office on the computer. That is part of your you just haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you for that, Doug. I know what my position is. Thank you.
Karen did write the grants. Karen was very successful.
Excuse me?
Already.
Okay.
Karen
Okay,
did write the grants.
okay.
And she was very successful.
Okay, I think we are going back beyond
But anyhow,
that.
there are grant writers
Thank you.
available as well.
Yes.
No one's disputing any of that.
Okay, I have one question here that, from somebody in the audience. I don't know if there are more that Hank or Tish has. But one of the questions has to do with the current MOA and how long is an interim position, how long does it last? And I have no idea, so I don't know who wants to address that.
The MOA doesn't address interim director positions. As a rule, we use interim directors when a situation is somewhat fluid and uncertain, which is kind of what we have right now. And so the decision about whether to move from an interim director to a permanent director here will be made in consultation with West Seattle's board. And most likely because the situation is fluid in that this community is trying to make a decision about whether it will remain with senior services or go independent or maybe align itself with another organization, we would most likely keep the position in an interim status. But we have not made a decision about that. And that's one of the reasons why you have interim positions, because you do have situations that there's too many question marks about them. And we're definitely in that kind of situation right now. I have full confidence in Lyle and the rest of the staff here. I'm not aware of any of the programs or services not being delivered in a way that they've always been delivered here. There is a whole lot of volunteers that also make this place run. They continue to step up and do that work. And so I've been very impressed with the way things have carried on. This is a strong center. This is a community that embraces its center, and this center will do well. I'm just confident of that.
It should be noted that the memorandum of agreement has specific provisions for how a center director is to be selected, and there's a selection process. And it's the ultimate decision of hiring a center director rests with the center board, not the senior services, under the memorandum of agreement. So, but the center board here has not taken any action with regard to selection of a new or a different or whatever center director because of the fluidity of the situation.
It's kind of like talking about the elephant in the room, but I just don't want to see something rash done by people who are perhaps almost like children on the playground saying, "You did that to me, and so I'm going to get even. Let me find all the ways I can get even." And then people suffer in the long run because what was done to get even didn't even really solve that problem, and then it made a whole bunch of new problems. So I guess I would like to have it just be voted on by people who don't have, that's open to the whole wide group, and not people who have some axe to grind.
That actually leads right into a question that someone submitted, because the question is senior services open to including representation of the 7 senior centers on the task force? If yes, how? And if no, why not?
Sure, excuse me, that question has actually been asked before, and the task force is made up of our board of directors. Senior Services Board of Directors is our governing body, and this is a decision around the governance of our organization. That's why they made the decision that it was not appropriate to have members of another governing body on that board and on that task force. That's one of the complexities of this MOA that makes things just really unusual and very, very hard to deal with, is that we have 7 different governing organizations all trying to make decisions. And our board of directors, which is their right and in their purview, can make a decision to only have the members of that board be part of a decision. And that's the decision that they made.
Okay, I want to make one comment going back to what the woman in the second row said. My observation as an outsider is that there are a lot of issues and a lot of conflict around those issues. And I'm hoping that these conversations that you're starting tonight will continue. If they can't continue on the task force, they're still, as they mentioned earlier, open to feedback. You still have board meetings that you can attend. You know, you still have a lot of options ahead of you that you can use to your advantage if you all open up, if you're honest, if you talk about the elephants in the room in the appropriate context. So I'm hoping that this will be the start of many more conversations and that you'll leave feeling positive about possible solutions. Anyway, that's my little soapbox speech. So questions. I think somebody has their hand raised.
All right, let me ask Senior Services now. You folks are writing grants and going after all sorts of funding from all sorts of sources. And we're coming out of a recession now. How does it look over the next year or 2 or 3 in terms of getting more money into senior services, which means that we get more money out here? We went through at 3 o'clock all the wherever you're going and how much money is coming from where. But you know, what does it look like to you folks about getting more funding so we can have more funding if we stay with you?
That's a good question, and that speaks to kind of what is the funding environment out there right now. Would that be fair? Sure. Well, I can tell you right now it's getting tougher. A lot of foundations, United Way, are making different funding priority decisions. They may go to basic needs, which is more homeless, kids, education, food assistance. That kind of cuts off a lot of the programs that we might have. Another big foundation, Seattle Foundation, that all of you have heard of, they changed their funding priorities, and a lot of the things they were funding us for are no longer in those priorities. And so a lot of the big funders are just making different decisions. Now with that, the funders that are funding places like Senior Services and other medium-sized, large nonprofits, they're looking for us to collaborate with each other. And the environment for funding smaller, independent, what they may view as not necessarily sustainable or stable nonprofits has really diminished. And you hear about nonprofits that go out of business all the time. It's just a different funding environment. That's not to say that should this center decide to go independent, you couldn't raise the money. There's still plenty of nonprofits out there that are doing that. But the reality is that the funding environment in this area has really changed. So senior services is looking for lots of different ways to raise money. Right now, we get about 52% of our funding from government sources. So everybody knows those are unlikely to grow in the coming years. We certainly hope that we're not going to have substantial cuts. But we already know one area we have some substantial cuts is in our transportation area. We get federal funds for our transportation, and for the region, about $1.2 million less will be coming for 2015, 2016. For our agency alone, that means about a cut of $400,000, which means if we can't replace that, those are real people who are not going to get rides because we have to cut routes on our Hyde shuttle services. So the funding environment out there is tough. We are looking to do things like earned income, another line of business, creating some fee-for-service programs to go out and engage a different part of the community. Our mission, of course, is to serve low-income folks, and we will continue to do that. That is the core of our mission. But in order to continue to serve those folks, we need to find some other revenue sources. So it's a very different funding environment than what it used to be.
Okay, let me ask you this: Do you as an NGO right now, do you collaborate with or go into partnership with or go after a pot of money and then split it up between the two of you at all?
Between the two?
Yeah, if you and another nonprofit, do you ever get together and collaborate and write a grant or something to go after a particular pool? Because the two of you together are a bigger fit.
Absolutely, and that's what funders are looking for, is bigger bang for their buck. They don't want to fund a lot of little nonprofits that are all doing the same thing.
Okay, but are you doing that right now, and that means then we as a center get more money?
Anytime we are getting funding, that becomes part of that allocation that we talked about in the first meeting, and that money comes into senior services, and then that money is pushed back out to our centers and to our programs, except if it's designated money. If we get money for Meals on Wheels, it has to go to Meals on Wheels. If we get money for just for care, you understand that. Yeah.
It should be noted that the Senior Center West Seattle receives very little funding from senior services. Thought maybe that somehow we receive a lot of money or they pay a lot of the expenses. And no, that's not accurate. The vast majority of the revenue generated by the senior center, or that's used to run the senior center, is generated by the senior center here in West Seattle. It's about $128,000 for next year, and less than that. It's, I think, just a little over $100,000 for this year, 2014, that the senior center receives from senior services and turns around and gives that money back again because we're buying services from them. We buy from them the bookkeeping services. We buy from them the administrative services. We buy all of those things. So that's why the board has spent some time in looking at what's going to be the budget and what's going to be the revenue for the next 3 years. So they're figuring out we're buying those services that we're now buying from senior services. If we're buying them from another source, how much is it going to be costing? And what's the revenue generation that's reasonable to predict for the center? And what are the expenses that are going to be incurred in buying services from other places? We don't just get money from senior services. They're not, and of the total, our projected revenue for 2014 is over $650,000, and that $128,000 that comes, it's less than that. It's a little over $100,000 that comes in and goes back to senior services is buying services, and it's a relatively small portion of the budget.
Okay, we are, however, still this center's third largest funder, and that the administrative fee that is paid is a little over 17%. And with that 17%, you get HR services, IT services, benefits are paid through that, marketing and communications, the grant writing that is costed in there. That's not even on the list of things. And you get economies of scale for that.
Okay, if the changeover would be we went independent, is that gonna be a relatively smooth, or do we go instantly on to life and death, trying to survive?
No. The senior center has a reserve of over $200,000 that it has here. And the budget that's envisioned has the staff remaining at the same salaries and the staff with comparable benefits to what they have now. So it should be, if we looked at the budget that we've analyzed and studied looking 3 years forward, should be a seamless transition.
And I can't speak to that budget because I haven't seen it, but I can say that the services that are provided by senior services are more than just bookkeeping services. The audit that happens every year allows the grant writers to go to funders and get funding. Without that, you guys will not be able to get any funding without that kind of audit. It includes the tax services, and that's filing all the taxes from local to state to federal. So those are all things out there. And, with respect, I said I haven't seen the budget, although, when Doug said the center that came back after a year, was in financial difficulty, well, that's the most recent center. The other center that's done that in the past is the Senior Center of West Seattle that left for a year because they thought they could make it on their own and found that it was a lot harder than they thought, and so they came back.
If I could address that.
I wanted to address another, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I just want to address that because I was involved with the board and here at the senior center when that happened, and I was involved with senior services, and that was the reason for the memorandum of agreement of having a contract between equal contracting parties, having it on a 12-month basis, a short lease on things. And it was done in terms of a careful analysis of what made the most sense at that particular time. And that's what we're trying to look at, what makes the most sense now in terms of the transitions that have occurred, and the transitions that we know are going to be coming in the future from senior services in terms of its treatment of the centers as no longer being independent centers, but instead being programs that are run by senior services. Senior services, it used to be called senior services and centers. And centers were a core part of it. And then it changed, and it's, so now it's senior services, and it views and wants to view the centers as being simply programs that are administered from the central office. So that's this contract, this memorandum of agreement, this was back in about 30 years ago. So when Tim says, well, we did it, that was 30 years ago with quite a different memorandum of agreement and quite a different set of facts and quite a different really financial situation in terms of owning the building, having paid for the remodel, and having money in the bank.
I would just like to comment on something that Nancy said a couple times, that the senior center would be run by senior services. That isn't the way we've ever worked with senior centers. That's not the way we would work with senior centers going forward. It's not the way we work with the Central Area Senior Center, which is very much a part of us and integrated into our organization. We hire a director hires staff, and that team of people runs the senior center for the benefit of the community. What we're talking about is overall governance, that we need something simpler. We need to have a single governing body, which is our board. So the center would still be doing everything that it's doing right now and have a great deal of autonomy and independence to meet the needs of this community. We would not be involved with deciding what kind of programs are being offered here. The staff would be, again, selected by the director who we've hired. So that would be the way it would look like and the way it would play out. not us running things from downtown, if we even had the wherewithal to do that, which we don't. It's me. And I'm sorry, but I don't have the wherewithal to run this senior center or any of our senior centers. But Lyle and his team do. And that's who would be running this senior center.
Do you guys have questions? We've been talking. Who has questions?
I do, in regards to that. You say that in the last grant writing, you put in a position for the village coordinator, didn't consult the board, and it's not something that the board was really all that excited about. So you say that you're not running things from downtown and you're not putting programs in place from downtown, yet you're chasing funding for a position that we didn't even know existed or what that looked like until after we saw the grant. I mean, can you speak to that?
Yes, I'll speak to that.
Can you repeat the question on the
Could you come to the microphone? We can't hear you down here.
What she brought up is a pretty specific issue. Recently, the senior center was applied for funding. It's called a request for investment, or an RFI. Senior Services responded on behalf of the senior center and the 3 other City of Seattle senior centers that are part of us. And there was an opportunity to get some additional money to support the program that Holly and the other staff here, the volunteer coordinator, is also quite involved, and many volunteers that Holly is running. And so it was a strategy that was built, that I wrote into the specific proposal that I thought might be appealing to the City of Seattle as a way of expanding the work that Holly was doing. It's not typical when you're looking at maybe expanding a program that already exists to go to the board. That's operations, and that's something that staff would be deciding on, not so much the board deciding on. And now, if the City of Seattle does fund the center for that additional money, then obviously the staff here and possibly some interested board members would be involved with developing and creating that program. So that's my response to your question.
We do have 2 questions.
One question is, I haven't read this yet, so maybe I should. Is there one senior center currently without an independent board?
I'm sorry, say.
Is there one senior center currently without an independent board? I mean, I don't know if that's a yes or no.
Yes, there is. The Central Area Senior Center, as was referenced a little while ago, had been part of Senior Services for a number of years. In 2012, they decided, their board decided that they wanted to go independent. They did that. They stayed independent for just a little bit over a year, realized that it was not financially viable for them to stay independent, and they were really floundering to the point where their doors were going to close within a couple of weeks. We had conversations with them, and they made a decision that it would be best for their long-term survival to rejoin some entity, and we were the entity that was available for them to rejoin. Because we would no longer be allowed to bring back a center under an MOA, they then returned to us as what's been referred to as a program. And with that, they now have still lots of community engagement. They chose not to have a single advisory board, but they have several different committees. I know they have a fundraising committee, they have a program committee, they have a facilities committee. I think there are 6 of them, so there's several committees. So they have lots and lots and lots of member and community involvement. And I'm happy to say that they are thriving as a center. They have never had the kind of community engagement that they have right now, and they do not have a single governing board.
So the follow-up question on that is that a model that the task force is looking at, or can you address that?
So that's where the questions about becoming a program first came out, because we did that last spring. So, of course, the other centers were saying, when we started talking about a need to change the MOA, that's the model that's out there. There's another center in town that happened with as well, and that is the Greenwood Senior Center, which is a part of the Finney Neighborhood Association. When they were not able to be sustainable under their own 501c3 and with their own board, they approached the Finney Neighborhood Association about joining them, and P&A did the same thing, said, certainly you can come on, but we're going to have one governing body. So their board was dissolved, and they also are thriving under that model.
We have a real tough question here that I'm going to have Dave address.
I actually have two questions here. The first one is the board united in their view of the situation with senior services? No, we're not. We have two sides to it. The majority right now is leaning towards we need to get more information in this task force that senior services is working with to get more information on that. We do have another side that had said they would like to secede at this point. But we have to do everything as a majority vote. We have to vote on everything. We can't just say because one person said it, that's what we have to do. We've had multiple discussions. We've had multiple emergency meetings, if you want to call it an emergency meeting, closed door meetings over this situation. And right now at this time, this is where the majority has voted, as the board goes, is to stay with senior services at this time, to hopefully get more information so that we can make a more informed decision. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make another decision in a month, 2 months, 3 months, 12 months, whatever it may be. But the task force has informed me and has informed you guys that they're looking at maybe 12 months in their review, in discussing with other boards, staff members, directors, so forth. And we are going to be part of that, and we're going to gather all that information, and I'm sure we're going to have more meetings. I'm sure we're going to have more votes on things. But that's just how the board works. It's a majority vote through the board.
I just want to follow up on the comment about the village and that whole concept. And, you know, I've actually been with senior services almost as long as anybody in the room. I was an intern in 1979. I was in graduate school, and I worked for senior services. And I'm trying to remain really open about this, and I really appreciate the work that all the board has had to do, all the research that's gone into trying to come up with the pros and cons of staying or going. But I just want to say that part of the village concept and part of the vision that comes from being a part of a bigger agency is important to me as a professional person. And I really appreciate that Joanne went after that grant, that they are a leading agency in the state for serving older adults, and that I'm proud to be part of them. And I think professionally it serves me very well to be part of senior services. It doesn't mean I won't thrive if we separate. I'm just saying that it is things like the village concept that they have their finger on that I worry about are some of the things that we might lose if we totally separate and become a very small senior center on our own.
Well, I wanted to, on the village concept.
Well, we only have 10 minutes left, and I want to get a few more questions.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, does anybody, so we're winding down, we obviously have some differences of opinion, but I'm...
Janet has a question.
Okay.
I don't know that I really have a question. What I actually have, I think, more is a statement. But I've been very impressed. I do a lot of volunteer work here and in many different areas. And I have to say that my observation is, Lyle, since you've been the interim director, things have run very smoothly. I'm very impressed that someone who was not at this center for a very long time jumped in and has been running with this and doing a great job. And I have a lot of respect for all of our board members. I know that there's differences of opinions in it, but I really support the board and their decision. And I know that you have more intimate knowledge than I do as a member and a volunteer as to what goes into the running of this center. And so I'm in full support for whatever the board has decided.
Any other last comments or questions?
Can I just go back to the village thing? Then communication would have been great, because Holly, the way it was told to me, what little information I could find online, I actually thought it would be counterproductive to what you're trying to do. Because I wasn't given enough information from senior services, because I didn't know there was enough transparency. But there was someone that I could call as a board member and say, hey, they're going after those dollars. How would that be good for us? I could only search stuff online and go, well, that sounds kind of funky. So, you know, if nothing else, of course I want to support Holly in whatever program she's doing. I actually thought it was a detrimental position to you.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some way that we all talk to each other better. Because a lot of these issues are that we don't all have answers. We don't get answers when we call. We don't know who to call. Things like that, so.
Actually, I think one of the things that we have up on the flip chart on this side, toward the back, are the email addresses. Come on, Vanna.
It's several pages back, Peter.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
And it's really clear to me that this is just the start of communicating about these issues and finding out more about what's going on. One more? One more? Ah, there we go. And so I'm hoping that you will continue this conversation, and that one thing that obviously stands out in my mind is that there are a lot of things going on that need to be communicated more often and with more transparency. And I think that will help you a lot. But I'm impressed with your engagement and your willingness to confront hard issues, and I hope you continue to do so. And you have their emails?
Let me put the extra, there's 2 email addresses that were up here. I don't know what happened to the sheet, but 2 email addresses, because the other one that I don't know what happened to that sheet, was the email, that address that was given to folks before, which is the sing828 @gmail.com. I don't know who tore that sheet away, but it was for the, we had it at the previous session.
Somebody really wanted that email address. I should also mention that Lyle is willing to pass on any information that you want to go to Senior Services. Senior Services on their website has all of their emails if you wanted to email them directly, but Lyle is more than happy, right? Happy?
Happy.
Yes.
I'm always
to pass it on. So. Okay, well, thank you all for participating, and I think Paula has...
Yeah, I just wanted to say we really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all and hear from you. Also want to leave you with that no matter what happens, Senior Services will continue to support this center and to support the seniors in this community. We have 3 programs that are here: Community Dining, Meals on Wheels, Enhanced Fitness, and those are our programs. We have those programs in a lot of centers that are not affiliated with us, and our mission is to serve seniors, and we're going to do that whether you continue to be affiliated with us under our umbrella or not. So wanted to leave you with that.